All right, so the US Fed making a big decision, and so are we, of course, tomorrow on interest rates. Let's see how this is all playing out on the local markets. Over to Nompu Siziba, live at the JSE.
Thanks very much, Francis. Global markets are trading rather cautiously. So many analysts are saying in the various notes that are being written. And this is ahead of the US Fed, which is going to make a decision on monetary policy, expectations being that they're going to keep interest rates unchanged, but may make an announcement on whether they're going to start unwinding that $4.2 or $4.5 trillion balance sheet that they have. And locally, we have the all-share index is also trading in negative territory at the moment. The local currency was on the back foot earlier, but after those inflation numbers came out for August, with inflation having risen 4.8% on a year-on-year basis, there was a slight improvement in the rand. But of course, we're waiting for that US Fed information to come out later, and that could be positive or negative for emerging market currencies. So we wait to see what happens there. Let's take a look at the indicators. Well, I'm joined by Brett Kumalo. He's a portfolio manager at Vestact. Thanks for joining us as usual, young man.
Lovely to be here.
Good stuff. Now, all eyes are going to be on the US Fed, and there's a suggestion, that market players are trading cautiously ahead of that announcement.
I hope they are. Yes, mainly because, I think we think that the Fed is not going to do anything really. It's going to leave the rates unchanged, mainly because, there's been a lot of pushbacks from inside the Fed itself. Guys basically saying they don't want to increase rates so, quickly. But, the eyes are on the Fed again, like you say, on the 4.5 trillion of unwinding of that balance sheet. Just want to see what's going to be the execution strategy here.
Indeed. And let's get straight into it because of time factors. Steinhoff listed their African vehicle, Star, today. Their initial offer price was 20 Rand 50 a share, but it opened 7% higher. So that suggests that investors are quite keen on the stock.
Correct. I mean, it was 7 times oversubscribed. So that's very good for Steinhoff shareholders because Steinhoff still holds 75% of the shares. And most importantly, as my colleagues were saying, basically that those European shareholders can now go back and update their spreadsheets or their valuation matrices or whatever they're using to value this business because they were not valuing the African business positively. So now that it's listed separately, we can see its true value.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And August inflation, it quickened, rising by 4.8% on a year-on-year basis, pretty much in line with expectations. The rand did improve as a result of that information. But of course, everything's up in the air because of what the US Fed is going to announce. And what do you think this means for monetary policy for South Africa tomorrow?
In South Africa, the SABC basically focuses on, price control. We don't really focus on growth. So seeing the inflation numbers coming in at where we are right now, is still in the lower spectrum of, that band of 4 to 6% in terms of interest rates. So, speculation is that tomorrow might see another rates decrease, 25 basis points. Yes. I hope that suffices. And the reason why these these inflation numbers look the way they are is because we've seen, all-time highs in terms of harvest on the commodity side of things, maize and the likes. And that's because of, the rains that we've seen recently and last year as well. So that's now starting to trickle down to the inflation numbers.
Indeed. May it continue.
Yes.
And Sasol, they announced that they have written off $900 million of debt that they used to bring in black investors on board in the Inzalo scheme in 2008. Now, doesn't sound like great news for the company, but it's great news for black investors, right?
You can see me smiling, right? Yes, it's good news for black shareholders and also for the company itself, because you don't want to, leave black shareholders, out in the open because they couldn't pay their vendor financing in time. And as a result, now management is, striking a different deal, which we're going to talk about now, which is a little more lucrative if you look at it from face value, because now you're going to be owning the local Sasol business, 25% of that, which is Sasol South Africa. And because of cash needs that management will need on the group level, the cash that is generated by the business at the bottom, where the black shareholders are, is going to be quite a lot. And because of that, they'll be able to actually meet their vendor financing requirements. And this scheme should be a lot more exciting than the previous one.
Going forward, we know that the Sasol share has sort of disappointed because we didn't anticipate that oil prices would halve or even more than halve and so on, and it affected Sasol quite a lot. But if you're in for the long term, presumably it's a pretty good investment for black shareholders or any other coloured person to be invested in.
Yes, I mean, well, the scheme itself is a good investment, like I said. But if you look at because the rich is still, the wealth here, the rich is still stay with the performance of the bigger group, which is the Sasol. And again, like you say, they basically all their fortunes are around oil and what the exchange rate does. So if you look at the exchange rate where it is today, it's good for operating for them. I mean, it's been around this area for a while now. It seems stable, if you want to ask me that. And the same could be said with oil. But the local business is very competitive, because I know a friend of mine worked at BP saying, Sasol is giving them a run for their money, because their all-in cost in terms of coal to oil is very cheap relative to guys that are importing oil into South Africa to stay competitive. So that's very good, as a story for the local business.
And also the other issue about Sasol is that, like you mentioned, they're in coal, they're also in gas, and they're heavily into chemicals. So they're quite diversified. Yes, their business does hinge around oil, but they don't have to just look at the oil price itself to succeed, right?
Yes, but it would help if the oil price would get back at $133 per barrel. And the chemicals business, once all the plants are running at capacity, it's going to be very lucrative as well, because they're very competitive instead of pricing in terms of pricing. I don't know, management here seems to be doing a lot of things right in terms of controlling costs. It's a good business and it's been ongoing for a while. I think it's a good story here for the black shareholders. I'm going to buy some. Okay,
good stuff. Thanks very much, Bright. Well, that's Bright's view on Sasol, saying that if you are an existing Inzalo shareholder, then you should seriously contemplate investing in the new scheme, which will come into effect after 2018.